everybody to this event co-sponsored by OD in LA and Alliance International University, California School of Professional Psychology, Organizational Psychology Programs. I'm so honored to have Sohee Jun with us, who is a two-time best-selling author, first with Mommy Tracked, which just by the title, you know that people were very interested in that. And most recently, The Aligned Mindset, her new book, which is the source of this book is the source of a lot of what she's going to be talking about today. She's a premier executive coach to women and sought after speaker where she speaks on how to maintain an aligned mindset as your organization rides all the waves of change. And boy, are we in for some waves of change. So today she's going to explore some essentials of leadership and answer our questions on a number of topics, including how she shifted from a full-time job to running her own consulting company, and also about networking to set up your next career move. So, Sohee, welcome. It's always great to have you.
Thank you. I just first want to say, I recognize that it's a Saturday morning. So for you to be here in person and on Zoom is such an honor. And I'm really, when Jonathan asked me, in full transparency, I really don't have that much time. But as he talked about this potentially being the last time, I said yes, because this is such a special place to me and where I got my first start. So, and lately, just as an aside, it's been a walk down memory lane. I went to my 30th high school reunion and now I'm back here. So I feel like I'm like working my way through history. So thank you for having me and thank you for joining me.
Great. Thank you. So I thought that not everybody will have read The Aligned Mindset, and it would be useful for us to welcome people who've joined us today prior to reading The Aligned Mindset and lead them on a little journey through some of the essentials to get them up to speed. I noted that you let yourself be vulnerable early in the book, and you described situations where your mindset was getting in the way of living fully. And I noticed that because a lot of books about somebody's perspective on things in the world always show them as the hero of everything. And you show yourself with your growth mindset and how you got aligned. And it really feels more true to me. And I really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you.
And I noticed that one of our other alumni posted something with similar vulnerability, although it was very brief, on LinkedIn, and other alumni and other folks in her network were speaking up, and they were clearly touched by that vulnerability. And we actually have a couple of questions later in the agenda on how you do that, because some people are like wowed by, could I do that? That possibility. You described like your should mindset was getting in the way of your making decisions that were authentic to you. What are some other examples of unaligned mindsets, unhelpful mindsets, as you call them, that people will resonate with? Some people will resonate with one, other people with others.
Yeah.
Or maybe even be surprised by.
Yeah, I love that question. Such a good one to start with. And I invite you all into the conversation. This isn't a Jonathan and I are just going to talk back and forth. So where you have questions or where you're curious, please jump in, especially on Zoom as well. And for those of you that haven't read the book, one of the things that I do out the gate is really list all of the what I call the parade of unhelpful mindsets. Things like people pleasing, things like the perfectionistic mindset, the should mindset that Jonathan mentioned. And I know for me that it was really a critical part of my journey to identify the dominant mindsets I was operating out of. And for me, that took a lot of inner work, a lot of curiosity, and a lot of digging deep into the beliefs, the stories that I tell myself, the stories that I believed, framing situation. And I think that that's a part of the journey. And I love when, Jonathan, you're like, you're aligned now. Well-ish. I mean, 80% of the time I have an aligned mindset, which I think is really good on any given day. And I think that's the reality, that I try to accept the parts of me that are not aligned and then get back to center. And as I coach people, the litmus test I always have with my clients is how quickly can we get you back to center? And that's the game. That's the game that I think is really important. And mindset helps with that. So um, the predominant one, and to answer your question more directly, especially with the women that I coach and the high achievers that I coach, it's really predominantly around perfectionism, which is very closely tied to people pleasing for a lot of people, and trying to get it all right, which takes joy and authenticity and just strips it from your soul. So those are the ones that I see predominantly, and they're all listed in the book. And actually, on my way here, I was thinking about something as an antidote to all of the ones that are listed in terms of the shoulds and the people pleasing and the perfectionistic. And I'm really very curious in this stage of my life about the responsible mindset and about a mindset of curiosity, which I think flips all of the different mindsets listed in the book on its head in terms of thinking about what's possible, thinking about how you get aligned, thinking about what it means for you in your life. When you get curious, it, I think, opens up the window for so many possibilities. So
You mentioned other unhelpful mindsets, and I found one of them interesting because I also, like what you were describing, get sucked into the perfectionist mindset, and it makes some things really thorough and other things really not quick enough, so it crowds out my time availability.
yeah,
But then you also had, right before that, the overachiever mindset.
yeah.
And I expected you to say that women executives have the overachiever mindset because that's what jettisoned them up to the top. So could you talk to the difference between those two?
Yeah, I think they're really closely tied in reality. Look, I think it's fair to say one gets to success, however that's defined, based on doing a lot, overachieving. And that I think when you get under the hood of it, it is really driven by a lot of perfectionism. So a lot of these mindsets are really what I call tied together. There's just a constellation of things that kind of work in concert. And I think that, yes, I listed them one by one for ease of understanding, but they operate in concert, often, two or more, and you can weave through them or, finally feel like you're done with perfectionism, but also still be in the, should mindset. So it's very dynamic. And that's, I think, what's so fascinating about mindset and why I'm so obsessed with it, because it is just like this constellation of things that contribute to a mindset. And that once we lock into how we can really, I want to be thoughtful of my words here, not control it, but be responsible for our mindset, gosh, the whole world like turns upside down in terms of what's possible and how you navigate your life differently.
Mm. For some people, shifting mindsets comes relatively easy. And I'm always surprised by that when I notice. But when people are finding it hard to make a shift, what are steps people can take that get them to that ability to pivot from an unhelpful mindset to a possible mindset that opens the future up differently?
Yeah, great question. I just want to just let's test out here and on Zoom as well. Let's define mindset. How would you define mindset? I'm curious. What does mindset mean?
I feel it's like conscious framework that you use in order to regulate your reactions. So it's within a certain boundary, but
Mhm.
whatever input you're receiving, how you react to that is defined by that boundary. So that's the
Okay,
mindset.
I love that. I love that framing of a boundary.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you. Others want to add to that?
Mine is similar to Louisa. I think some part is because we're coming from Eastern culture, but to me, it's the sets of strategies that you have to achieve your goals. So, if something comes on the way, you ignore it, or like how much you want to push yourself to get to that goal, or how you find your goals.
Okay.
Yeah.
Set of strategies, boundaries. I think you had it. Read that. Yeah.
I was gonna say the tendencies or the lens that you look at the world. What's that lens that you look?
Mhm.
Yeah, I love that. And what's your name?
Nas.
Naz. I know you're not.
Yeah.
Seen you in a while. Anybody on Zoom have want to add?
We've got a couple in the chat. So Amantia says beliefs you operate from during certain situations.
Rachel, did we say the same thing at the same time?
Yeah, I think we did. We basically had the same comment.
Basically.
Yeah.
I love it. So I will say yes, it's all of those things. And mindset has become so popularized in the past, I don't know, 5 years. That's just an anecdotal guess. And, you know, the work, as I shared in the book, is really popularized by Carol Dweck, who talked about the growth mindset. And I think that it put it out there in the zeitgeist about why we should care about mindset. And you know, when I talk about an aligned mindset, which how I define it is how your thoughts help support your actions against that North Star or that vision. So what is it that you want, and how do your thoughts support the way that you act? And, you know, I love what you said about it's like a reaction. And I think when you have an aligned mindset, it allows you to act with intention versus react. So I think that's a really key difference. And did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, just kind of meandered.
Oh,
my
well,
head.
actually, no, you didn't get to and what steps can
Yes.
people take when they're
Yeah.
stuck and want to do the pivot?
Yeah, you know, and it's very similar. And by the way, for those of you, I think you'll get it afterwards. For those of you in Zoom, I have the QR code to the aligned mindset or how you can get the aligned mindset. And I think it's the same framework that I offer in one of the chapters around working through fear, which is really the key about becoming aware. And that starts with curiosity about yourself. And this is why I say it's so important. It's understanding the stories and the ways that you frame a situation and the context that you make up around it. So for example, coming in here, you know, if I'm not aware, I could have let my inner critic rule the entire experience for me. Oh my gosh, it's a Saturday. I'm so tired. I was up since 2 a.m., blah, blah, blah. This is going to be no good. All of which is true, by the way. I've been up since. Been up since 2 a.m. However, because I was aware that those were little like strings of thought, I reframed it in a way that would support me in the situation to be able to be here and present and to talk about a really important topic. So becoming aware, it's really key. Do you know what you're saying to yourself and how you're framing the situation that allows you to show up in the way that you want to and that you intend to or not? Or do you just willy-nilly it through life, right? Think about all the situations where you're like reactive and not intentional. So then once you become aware, then what is that more supportive framing? How do you frame it in a way that will support how you want to show up? And the third step is then how do you take that micro step forward? I am the biggest proponent of micro steps. I don't believe that sustainable change happens when you try to go big. And I think most people, when they think about change, oh my God, I got to do the whole thing. I got to work out every single day of my life. Good. And that is just not a recipe for success. So it's the micro action forward that you choose consistently over time that gets you aligned and with the aligned mindset. So those are 3 steps. Really, I say simple, but very hard. And you need to just be in the practice of it.
Do you
That
have,
answered it, huh?
yeah, do you have a practice like meditation or relaxation, something to take you out of the tension of a should or a perfectionist mindset? That then gives you like neutral ground on which to build your or shift to your desired mindset.
Yeah, I have so many practices, and I call them non-negotiables by now because I've tried it enough that if I try to fool myself and I'm like, all right, I could do it without, then it just takes me a really long time to get back to center and in an intentional mindset that I would rather not do at this point in my life. So to answer your question, it is every morning, and I have to preface this with it's been a 3 or 4 year buildup.
Mhm.
So by that, I mean, I wake up every morning and I meditate. And that's literally sitting in my bed. I use the apps that I know that are supportive of my mindset and the way that I want to show up. First thing, and I have 3 kids. So trust me when I say that I've had to train them to do not say anything to mommy, at least for 10 minutes when you see me that I'm awake. Because they
Yeah.
know when I have my earbuds in that that's what I'm doing. And then the other additive thing that I've recently incorporated in the past probably 2 years is movement. For me, if I'm ruminating in my head and it's just not getting anywhere and it's unproductive or what I call like you're on the repeat track, then I know that I have to move my body. So walking, literally, just I walk a lot. And my oldest yesterday, who is in cross country and loves to run, we're like, oh, we have to get new walking shoes. He's like, you run? I go, no, I walk a lot. 15-year-olds can be so judgy. He just turned 50. Anyway, he's like, you run. I was like, well, I walk. He's like, you're right. You do walk a lot. Because they see that I walk a lot and they don't make this connection, but it is to process what's in here like differently. I've tried it to where I know that if I walk, my brain connects differently and allows for different ideas to flourish. That has worked really well for me. So those are the 2 things that even if I'm traveling to speak, even if I'm at a client site, I even have my clients, at their executive meetings or the team buildings that I do with them, we will ground into the space by doing a little bit of breathing exercise to help us tap into the current, like where we are versus being in their heads and everywhere else. So, I live the practice and I try to give that to the clients that I serve too.
Awesome. And they don't say, oh, no, I'm not gonna do meditation or I'm not gonna do movement.
Well, the movement stuff is up to them, but I don't say we're gonna meditate. I say it's a phrase around like I'm gonna invite us into this space. And in order to do that, I invite us to do some breathing. So it's less like I'm gonna force you to meditate and more just an invitation in. And I think the words that you use or I use are very intentional because if I say we're gonna meditate versus I invite us into, be in the space in order to do that, we're gonna breathe. That's a whole different feeling, right?
Yeah.
So no one has resisted so far.
Wow. I'm taking notes. So there's a discussion that happened from a few sources when we started to think about how aligned mindset is your alignment with your own personal North Star, and that there can be situations where, Ping, are you ready? Do you have your page?
Oh,
Where, and yep, glasses. Um, so where there are situations that we uncovered where the personal North Star and the organizational North Star may be going, or the world's North Star, maybe going in a couple, in different directions. So, Ping and Garrison, do you want to ask your questions now?
Tell me your name.
Cheers.
Garrison.
Okay, so my question is, when you need to work, what if you don't have the opportunity to set boundaries at work and kind of like navigate that work-life balance with, between work life and family life? Like, what if you have like a need to have to work, like if you're low income or if
Yeah.
you have some sort of, other external engagement that you are forced to have to choose between those two things, but you're being torn between needing to choose to work and needing to your core value, just to spend time with family.
Yeah, I thank you for asking that question. I think that's a reality for a lot of people. And I know early on in my career, I definitely felt that tension. It's like you have to do this thing, but your values and your desires pull you somewhere else. And it's a big tension inside. I don't know if that's true for you. I think that part of the journey is embracing the seasons. And I introduced that in my first book, Mommy Tracked. And by the way, it's not just for moms. It's really just about how do you define success on your own terms. And what I introduced there is that sometimes we have to lean into a certain part of our life more than others. So knowing that puts the pressure off a little bit, that if, for the next year or two, I really have to do this and work and save up and do all the things that we need to do for monetary reasons or other reasons, then you do that knowing that at some point you're going to put your foot off the pedal and lean into another part of your life that maybe brings you back closer to your family and more time there. I think that's a lot more forgiving than saying, oh my God, I'm in this. And I think as humans, this is natural in human dynamics and psychology in general, is that we focus on the immediate and we just think that that's what that is forever. And I know I've been in those mindsets as well, where it's like, oh my gosh, I have to work 60 hours a week and this is going to be it for the rest of my life. I can't deal with it. So if we think about it in seasons, whether it's just a sprint of 6 months or a year, or even as long as 2 years or more, knowing that that's what you're going to have to do in service of a thing that's very necessary and urgent, and then saying, okay, when that mark is done, let me reorient and see how I can integrate other parts of my life that are just as important. So I think that's a lot more forgiving, a little bit more realistic than trying to shove it all in at the expense of you and burning out. Does that help?
Yeah, that's, thank you.
Yeah.
Can I comment on this quickly?
Of course.
Yeah, sorry. I have been, experienced that for, a couple of years, especially after I moved here. And one thing that helped me so much, even for setting the goals and then deciding how long I want to be in this pain, was like, I remind myself, and I've already, wrote it out and put it on, on my door and all that. I work to live, I don't live to work. So that really helps you to see, okay, do you really need to do this even, for a short period of time, or no, you're just, you have a hard time to get out of your head or the options. Because sometimes if you, think about that, okay, work to live, then you might say, okay, this is just for, extra thing, and it might not, work that way.
Yeah.
So that was just something I just want to share it to you.
Of course, yeah. And what you're talking about is the mindset, right? And sometimes when we're in a flight or fight or fight or flight mode, it's hard to see what's possible because psychologically we're just trying to go and survive. And sometimes that's what that is. And when you can embrace like a more of a curious mindset when that's possible, that does open up more possibilities about what's currently in my situation that I haven't tapped into, that maybe somebody I can talk to or that can support me, that will be less of a like, oh gosh, I have to do this situation. Does that make sense? Because what I've realized time and again is that we don't realize all the stuff that we have already that can help us in the situation. So anyway.
So Garrison, this was a very fruitful question. Thank you for
It was, yes.
Hey,
So, good morning, Dr. Sohee. Thank you for joining us this morning. Most of us has to be here because it's part of our class.
I get
Yeah. But for you, yeah. So my question to kind of hone in a little bit on I was wondering what specific strategies do you recommend for individuals that are working in high stress environments? They're so like myself, I work with the Defense Department there, and a lot of times there are our decisions, put people's lives at risk. And so I was wondering as far as what specific, strategies, to maintain an aligned mindset in that, because we say that a mindset is a collection of your beliefs and but at that time there, when you're looking at that time span, there, it can be difficult to maintain a mindset when when so much is riding on your decisions.
Yeah, I mean, talk about, it's like life or death type of stuff, right?
It is,
Yeah. So I'm just curious, Ping, and thank you for asking that question. What do you do currently to help you in your high stress environment?
I try not to, so when I get put in that situation, I kind of just go back to the fundamentals, the basics of why am I here and what's my mission, and kind of drown out the noise of what's going on around me. Because if I forget, kind of, that North Star, kind of what my mission is there, and I succumb to the noise there, then that's where it affects, I guess, my decision. It affects my mindset there. If I'm thinking about the Zoom call that I had with my daughter last night,
Yeah.
and or if I'm thinking about what's the menu for dinner, just those are just noise or that at the time that it would definitely, that's what we call the fog of war.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you got to get through that fog and have that. So.
Yeah, look, I think it's a really important question that you asked, because all of us are operating in our own, what we perceive as like really critical, crazy, very dynamic worlds in which we're getting pulled in many different ways. Your context might be different than mine, where you're making really difficult decisions that impact people's lives. And in other ways, like you have CEOs and executives who are making decisions on behalf of thousands of people, and their lives will be impacted in some way. So regardless of the situation, people's lives are going to be impacted. And I think the question is, how do you drown out the noise? Because as humans, we get pulled into that, right? I mean, as Zen, as Buddhist as I want to be, I get pulled into that. Like last night, I got an email. I'm like, oh my gosh, how do I respond to this? And just had me ruminate. And so that's life. But the practice then is going back to your big vision. Why are you doing what you're doing? And then how do you protect that ability to serve in that way? So mental well-being, emotional well-being, that is so much more common in the workplace now, which as an aside, I'm really glad about. And I think it's important to have all of these conversations in the workplace. That's an aside. And I think for you and for anybody in these really high stress environments, it's to think about, again, what are those non-negotiables? And they don't have to be big. They can be as small as, you know what? I'm going to take a walk around the block when I feel myself getting heightened and triggered and like really distracted from what I have to do right now. And it really is those simple practices that over time really help you ground into a more fuller toolkit of what you can pull from. So literally, it's like, what do they call that? Rachel knows it should be amygdala hijack, right? It's when we're so triggered that we're not able to make really grounded and the best decisions. So when you take a deep breath, neuroscience has proved that just the ability to take a deep breath allows you to access your frontal part of your brain, which is the executive functioning of the brain, which means that we can make better decisions. So if we can do that practice, I think that that's the place to start to be able to come back to center so that you can make decisions that are really good and solid and less reactive. I hope that makes sense because I think, and I actually just wrote about this for my publication, Forbes Coaches Council, and it's why we're also addicted to reactivity. I mean, I can go on about this, it's a side topic, but it's something very relevant about the world that we're in now, which is this reactivity. You email me, I'm gonna email you right back. You text me, I'm gonna text you right back. And it is really untethering us from making grounded, solid decisions that are aligned for our mission and the people that we are in context with. So I hope that this is all tracking and it's making sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that occurred to me when you asked what to us is a mindset is that it's not just about the individual mind. It's about the assumptions that float through the environment, the pressures and goals that float through the environment. I remember reading something by Rumi, who wrote somewhere around 1,000 years ago, and then realizing that it's so similar to some new age thinking of today, and then read that somebody else in a different country wrote something similar. And it's like there must have been a channel of people talking to people talking to people that resulted in the sharing of cultural mindset or the sharing of assumptions that lead to cultural mindsets.
Yeah.
And that's probably happening all the time. And so it's not just within, it's also what's in the air and conversation around us.
It is, yeah.
And so the questions that Ping came with, I realized that it starts with the assumption I'm in a high stress environment. And are there assumptions within that high stress environment that you can have discussions about? Is it safe to have discussions about so that the stress can be lowered and the mission critical actions still kept? And that's been going on for me for a while now. How do you shift a whole organizational culture?
I did. The assumptions thing is a really interesting one because, I have a client that is really trying to tackle that, just assumptive behaviors that, when you take a moment and take a beat, is what I say, you can get curious about it and actually ask the question to clear through the assumptions that a lot of people don't take the time to do. So I think that applies here too.
Mhm. Thank you. Ping, do you have another question that you want to ask?
Yeah, following on the same line there is that you talk about that, the mindset doesn't really stays the same there. And so when I was just wondering there as far as, how do you see the concept of the aligned mindset, in the future, in the face of what we see the world's evolving so fast, especially with technology there, with AI, society changes. How do you see, that concept, changing with the alignment mindset there?
So this question was actually, as I looked through it last night, that's my favorite one.
Oh.
Yeah, so he asked, how do you see the concept of an aligned mindset in the face of a world evolving fast with AI and societal changes? So obviously, I'm assuming that we've all kept up or have heard about AI and the ways that it's being used or leveraged or the possibilities or the damaging, or there's so many sides to this AI technology and what it can do and can't do and the dangers of it. And I think why I love this question the most is that without an aligned mindset, then it becomes this world in which we are just being reactive to the technology. The truth of the matter is change has always been the constant. Taxes, change, birth and death. So I counter when somebody says, oh gosh, change is here upon us. It's always been upon us. It's just a matter of now what's the context and now what is the change. And so in order to ride the waves of change with a little bit more assuredness and a little bit more grace through the change is to have an aligned mindset. And this gets to what I was talking about reactivity, is that when we can get centered, when we can quiet the noise and the assumptions and the shoulds and check into the stories that we are framing up a situation with, then whether it's AI or whether it's any other technology or thing in the world, we're able to act accordingly in much more aligned way than react, if that makes sense. So that's just my perspective on that today, because I think that if we're unaware, again, like the interaction that we have with technology and AI, which by the way, I love sharing this quote, which is from a colleague of mine. He said, AI knows a lot, but you know better. So think about that and how an aligned mindset really contributes to that. You know better than the technology thus far. So it's about being purposeful. Yeah.
So I think that what you were just talking about, that how do you stay focused? An aligned mindset will help you stay focused in a world where the pace of change is constantly increasing. I think our clients are going to be asking that a lot. How do I deal with this crazy changing world? And the more we can mine the ideas in the aligned mindset and our practices that keep us centered, I think the more effective we'll be at staying centered ourselves and helping our clients with those changes that to them are overwhelming. And hopefully we'll support each other over time when the change feels overwhelming and some of us are centered in the moment and can provide that moral support, and some of us are finding ourselves unmoored by what's going on. So I think what you just talked about is kind of decisive for a lot of what we're going to be faced with, a lot of the questions we're going to be asked in the near future.
Yeah, in the recent, I want to say probably a year or two, it's been even more, I would say, palpable, the need for the work that we do in this world, and especially as I coach C-suite leaders, it's very clear that that's challenging them. Yeah.
That's good to know. Sometimes we think of C-suite leaders as, wow, they have such high level positions. They're powerful people and they're human beings like us.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And it's lonely at the top when everybody thinks you're powerful, and therefore they're more calculating in the way they communicate with the CEO. And the CEO needs somebody who's not calculating to be a sounding board. And I think that's part of what you do as a leadership coach. So the flip side is keeping that when you're centered and keeping that groundedness in the face of crazy change,
Yeah.
you also get vulnerable. And this is something that people noticed in the book. So Riz, Fernando, and Sapita had questions about, and maybe Riz, you want to go first? Do you have the list?
Yeah.
Before we do that, let's check in on our Zoom friends. I just
Yeah,
want to make
sure.
sure that if there's questions, please do ask it. If anything's unclear up to this point, please
And
ask.
yes, and Rachel is monitoring the Zoom chat. Yeah. And she's putting your questions into a back channel document that I have in front of me on the laptop. So I'm paying attention to what folks are asking on Zoom. And that means you've got permission to ask away. And thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. I just want to be mindful that we have online people too.
Yes. So Riz, your turn.
Right, so, we were having this question, there was a build up to today, and there was OD in LA, there was class discussion, and we at IOPS also are partially hosting it, so the Students Association for Higher Psychology. So we had discussions there as well, but all the while, one question came to my mind was that you've obviously created an impactful career of, working with C-suite leaders, working with women leaders, but my question is around that personal journey. So, couple of things. First of all, I'm trying to pivot my career from Bangladesh to the US. So it's absolutely a new journey for me. I'm trying to take that courageous move and taking small steps one day at a time.
Yes.
But so my question to you is actually two. Number one is, how do you gain that courage of putting yourself out there? I think partially I got answers already from bits and pieces of what you have answered, but maybe one consolidated response would also be helpful. So
Same.
So I was wondering where do you gain that? Because we as women, as we grow up, both in the personal space as well as at work, don't show anger, don't show your emotions, contain, be like the men, they're less problematic. So how do you overcome that and show what you are capable of, made out of, and how do you put your brand, your proposition out there? So that's one question.
That's a big one.
Time for that. Exactly similar, so maybe I should better get ask that to you. Kind of like, yeah.
Yeah, and the second one is probably, why do you coach only women and not the men, not coach? Oh, it's hard.
I know. I have coached men and I do coach men.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, but the majority of my clients are female.
Okay.
On purpose.
Okay.
Let me get to the first question, which is so dynamic and juicy. Okay, where do I start? So if I'm hearing you, it's how did I navigate that journey of being my authentic self in this culture that it doesn't recognize it, doesn't really applaud it as much for being who you are. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And you want to add to
Yeah,
that?
my question was also like similar to Reese's with a little bit, different angles. I think maybe I can ask that and then you kind of like just give it one answer to both of them. I have been experiencing similar issues. I got here when I was 24.
Yeah.
In my, Persian culture, I absolutely like have a good voice. I can be a leader of, like a lot of people. But
Yeah.
when I moved here, and actually in Farsi, we have a slang that it says, each language is a new identity or a new personality. That was also what I would have been struggling, not only for, the professional career, but actually about like how you find yourself or your, be your true self in the second, culture. And that's why I asked the question, I think you also mentioned in your book about imposter, syndrome. So yeah, similar to that, I also have that.
I love it. I love it.
Session.
Yes, I know. My gosh, I could do a whole session on this. I write and I talk a lot about imposter syndrome, which is another word for imposter phenomenon. But let me start with your question first. And, congratulations on taking that courageous step. It's big. And I share that because I also come from a different culture, and it's South Korea, and I came to the States when I was 6. So I share my origin story quite often in the podcast I'm invited to be on, because I think it's important to share that. Coming from a different country into one that is brand new, and you're trying to navigate the culture, the language, the food, and the what and who and all the things with little kids, like I was 6. So, that is a challenge in and of itself. And I think that that's important to share, because as an adult, it has made me resilient, which is getting to the question of how do you overcome it? My personal belief is that it's not an overcome, it's a how do you build more core confidence around being your true self. And in the book, I introduce the phrase that my dear friend and colleague said, which is do it afraid. And my journey has been that I don't want to dishonor myself by not doing it, even though I'm afraid. There's still situations today that I'm so afraid of, like I have a conference I'm speaking at in February, and Simone Biles is the headliner, and like I'm on stage with her type of thing. So yes, I think when we're living our truth, we will always be a little afraid. And I think the litmus test is, can you take the micro step forward anyway, in service of you and how you want to show up? And I think the authenticity piece is like, I just learned that to not be who I am in the moment, whether today I'm different today than I was a year ago. So I honor the becoming of who I am. So let me just say that too. Like I was a different person 2 years ago, I was a different person a year ago. And that's okay. It's honoring all the pieces of who I am. And I think that is the authenticity. It's kind of like a weird way of answering. Like I lived in a corporate world that I tried to be a certain way. The way that, gets rewarded. It's you have to show up like, I'm making up a name here. If you want to be a leader, you have to show up like Ted and be Ted. I tried that. They said, wear pantyhose. I wore the pantyhose. They said, work 60 hours. I did it. And then some. And what I found was that really disintegrated parts of me that didn't feel true to me. I love work. I love what I'm doing, but I'm not a workhorse in that way. I believe that I can have fulfilling work and not have to grind my way through it. And so it was in all of those practices throughout my life, throughout my career, throughout coaching, that just helps me be who I am. If I'm not who I am, if I'm not who I am, then I am not being of service in the way that I was brought into this world. So it's just like this big esoteric thing. I know I'm kind of speaking broadly, but I think it's owning who you are, all the pieces of who you are, and using it in service for others.
Maybe you can share your definition of the North Star. You said against the North Star.
I'm gonna,
Sorry, did I?
I'm going to repeat questions when they're not said very loud, because we've got a word from Zoom land that it's a little quiet. There is well, I'm not going to try moving the mic. Yeah. So can you repeat your question a lot louder?
Just asking about her definition of how one finds and keeps in alignment with one's North Star.
Yeah. So how do you find and keep, how do you find your North Star, and how do you keep aligned with that North Star?
Yeah, I think how you find it, the start of it is to notice what lights you up, in the sense of like what gives you energy. So in the corporate world I was in for 15 years, I just got really curious about, wow, I feel the most in service and the most impactful doing X. And I did all of the things, and this is kind of career advice. A lot of people ask me, like, how do you find your thing? And how did you find coaching? Well, in the early years, I played around in terms of, I want to try a lot of different industries. and that's part of my DNA. I have a very entrepreneurial spirit. I want to try different things. I'm a trier outer of things. And what that means in the work world is it might look like I job hop. It might look like I'm not committed because, hey, you were 2 years here, you were a year here, you were 5 years here. So if you let that run your narrative and then you fall into that mindset, then that strips you of your authenticity. I owned my story to say, hey, I actually wanted different experiences. I wanted entertainment. I wanted to try financial services when it was hot. I wanted to try engineering. I wanted to try all of those things because guess what? It serves me now as an entrepreneur to be able to speak all of the languages that, in the corporate world of, the different industries and the people that I get to serve. So it's in the trying out of those things that I noticed, okay, this gives me energy. Why? I'm curious. Oh, you know what? It uses my superpowers. I love to create space, to be an active listener, to be a thought partner, to use my unique gifts in that way. And it just so happened to marry up with coaching. And so I jumped into that because that's where I noticed I was the most impactful and the most fulfilled in doing the work that I do. So it just led me to the next step. Okay, what can I do with this? And then in my entrepreneurial life and in the coaching world, I was like, oh my gosh, I love writing. Hence the books and the other ways that I write. So I really do believe in get curious and get curious about specifically what gives you energy and why. And is it a combination of because you like this and that and see where it leads you? And don't try to solve for the whole thing. Don't try to solve for this is my North Star and it's the fixed because that amounts to, I think, disappointments when we get so fixed on something. It's can you flow with the journey, go where you are in service and what gives you energy and you know that you're making an impact. I followed that in my career and it's really served me well. Does that answer questions? Yeah.
It's funny, now I'm realizing I have an answer to that too.
Yeah.
Go where you're invited.
Mhm.
Sometimes people invite you to go in a direction because they've noticed your superpower and they can see your North Star that you're maybe subconsciously moving towards. And that has played a huge role in my life on the career side. So I discovered things that I didn't know I was really going to like and that I ended up loving. I ended up doing things first in an organization that we didn't exactly know how to do. So I was experimenting. I'd have discussions with mentors, and I love the way you talk about mentors in the book. I didn't have a mentor, and I felt like I don't have a mentor. And then reading what you wrote, I started to get, you know what? I have a lot of mentors, and they've made a significant difference for me. And there's a T-shirt I have. The more that I've learned from my teachers, I've learned from my students. It's 2,000 years old. From one of the highly respected rabbis, and that's been true also. You get your advice from all sorts of places, and when it's advice that's noticing your superpower, go with it because it's telling you you have this as a North Star.
Yeah. I also want to answer the question when she comes back around imposter phenomenon. Yeah.
Great.
And just to your point too, Dr. Tober, you said, well, first of all, I hope some of us were a mentor at some point, even if it was just a
Yes, I was thinking Dr. Tober should treat us. It's on Dr. Tober.
But Dr. Tober, you had mentioned early on that you're surprised how people can change their mindset so easily, but which I think that especially if you're self-aware. I'm a leader in a male-dominated organization, and I have really found myself I've just recently had to change my mindset because when I came into this role, because I'm a woman, because I'm also very educated and I'm almost done with this craziness.
Yeah, yeah.
Having a PhD, I know a lot, I have a lot of experience, and so when I went into the position as a leader, I just wanted, and in a male-dominated organization, I just wanted to prove myself. Oh my gosh, I just want to prove myself, but I have found myself that the thumb is on me. And I've struggled with that because don't want them to see me as a woman, and I don't want them to see me as an educated woman, and I feel sometimes they put their thumb on me. I don't know why, and I can't figure it out, but I've had to recently pull myself out of that mindset. And what you had said, be aware of other people as well and who they are and not take it personal. And understand what I'm here for, what my journey is, but my question is, how do you stay in that mindset? Like I've just worked on that in the last few weeks that I was like, okay, I have to change my mindset here. This isn't working. But how do you keep going? How do you maintain it? How do you sustain that? You said baby steps, but I don't really have time for baby steps. I need to keep this mindset so that I can finish what I'm doing here and achieve my goals.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing your story. And what's your name, by the way?
Tamara.
Tamara. So kudos for stepping into leadership in a really environment that doesn't look like you. And so just to recognize that when you're in a situation like that, as I've been as well, you will get the spotlight. And I've learned that it doesn't really matter what the reason is that you have the spotlight, just to say that that's what it is. And so you've reframed it for yourself into a mindset that it sounds like is more in service of you and where you want to go. So what I would say is, in order to keep that, I have lots of tactical things and I have lots of just bigger practices. One is every day I have, you guys are going to know all my hacks. That's okay. I'm vulnerable and authentic. I literally have Post-it notes that I write for myself with phrases that really resonate for me. And it's almost like Groundhog Day, because I don't know what happened when I had kids, but like I forget things quite often. So like when I open up my laptop and I see that phrase, I'm like, okay, let me reground myself into that mindset. And it's a powerful reminder for like anytime I'm about to hit a coaching session with a client, it helps me reground myself and be in a mindset of service and all the other things that I need. So if those things, Post-it reminders work for you, put it everywhere. If mantras and affirmations work for you, do it. If meditations work for you, like give yourself the advantage of trying out all the toolkits. And the one that I think is most helpful, I get coached myself. So every week, every other week, I meet with my coach. We work on my mindset. So do you have somebody in your life that you can go to that will help you reground and reframe and anchor into that really confident mindset that it sounds like you're wanting to stay in? So those are the things I would recommend. But having people around you that formally, informally can help lift up your scaffolding so that you can move forward powerfully is really important.
Thank you. And I do have, Dr. Toby, you are one of them.
Did you know that?
But yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I know you were wanting to speak to Sapita's question
Yeah.
about imposter phenomenon. I like your rephrasing of it, by the way, instead of calling it syndrome.
Yeah, that's the popular term syndrome, but I think APA terms it imposter phenomenon. So rephrase your question, or tell me your question again around imposter.
So I was saying that again, let me put it this way. When you're coming from a different culture or different country, especially, after age of 18, you have a lot to learn. And then sometimes you get lost between all these little details, or when, like practicing or learning, like how to deal with this new life. And at least that was my experience, that after a while I realized that, okay, I've lost who I am. I don't know, like I forgot. And also in my personal life, a lot was changing. So there was a moment that I realized that I literally even, cannot remember who I was. So if someone would show up and say, hey, this is who you were, it would sound like a stranger to myself. So I kind of like By that time, I decided to kind of like learn the new me. But then after, like a couple of years, I realized that, okay, there's two different person. Not in a bad way, but the thing is like in my first culture, if I go back to Iran, like, I have that confidence. I don't need, too much time to like, go out things. It's like I'm ready to go and then tackle with the life. But then in the second culture, I'm kind of like hesitant. And I think that's because of, like when you go out as an adult, you get a lot of, yes and no's, but it's more like no's in the first few years. Yeah, because I we have to learn things.
Yeah.
So that's why I realized that, okay, I don't have an imposter, syndrome for my personality, but as you mentioned, I think that's a better, a way to put it. I have a imposter phenomenon for my second, culture and language, which I've worked on a lot in the past few years. And there was an improvement, but it's still, I come around sometimes. The only thing that helps me to overcome it or not, set me back is like I'm a fighter by nature. Dr. Droper knows, so he always says that, okay, you find a way.
Yeah.
But that helps, but still, it's not as the confidence in the first culture.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense. I mean, you're coming from a known. It's what you grew up in. It's like fish in water. They're in water, they don't realize it, they're confident in it, they swim. And then you're like put into the ocean. So it's, I think, one understanding that that's kind of natural for that to happen, given where you were. And especially, I have also friends who came to the States later in life, which presents different challenges than earlier. So even in that transition, it can be nuanced in the sense of like, my biggest thing at 6 was, learning the language and the food, which is different than when you're an adult here in the States, right? You have to come almost as if you have to know the culture already, which I think is different challenges. And it's knowing that, it's giving yourself grace to know that, okay, this is a hard transition and the cement is not solid yet. I love to use the analogy of building a house because it's so visual. I'm a visual thinker. And for me, it's like when you were talking about that, you had all the building blocks of a solid house. And now you like here, the structures are crumbling or have crumbled because you're not sure. And I think that's normal. First, it's to recognize that that's normal. And secondly, it's to understand that imposter phenomenon, this is talked about quite often, is that it's a constellation of things that where you might feel confident in one area in the new world, in this new country, you might not in another area. So it's a dynamic interplay is what I'm trying to say. That it's not this whole, I feel confident and I'm confident everywhere I go. Because I think some people think in those terms. I know with my clients in particular, they think in very duality, black and white, this or that way. And I want to invite us into a world where we embrace all parts of us and explore what's possible. And so for you, it's really looking at, okay, I have this. Sometimes I'd feel so uncertain here. Other areas I feel a little bit more certain. What do I need now to move forward? I think that's the question. What do I need now to move forward in a way that is much more supportive of me and will help bolster my confidence?
It's quite interesting because that's what I, kind of did the past few years when I was working on it. Like, I also like decided to like, okay, understand. Okay, I came here at age 24. I started like literally, I knew the language. I didn't have any English problem, but at the same time, coming from a very, big family with a lot of friends, all of a sudden here lonely with all the issues that, Persians might have because of, the financial issues between the US, so on and so forth. I had to start building up everything myself. So it's not like another 24 years old who is living here, or I'm 35 now. Maybe my life looks a little bit different, but I did it myself. And then I decided to kind of like be a little bit easier on myself and then experience the new me rather than trying to catch up with other friends.
Yeah.
So and I like the final, outcome because it's it's a little bit better, but yeah, it's more about like, now you're putting it out, I think it's more about the fear, but rather than, not having the confidence, but yeah, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
you're welcome. I talk about the fear mindset too. I mean, that's normal.
Mhm.
Wow, anytime we're putting ourselves out there in a different way, it's gonna come up.
So there is another question in this set of questions. Fernando, is this a good time for your question?
First, a comment, I really have to say, I love the experience of your book. So my friends and I, we do something very sacred on a quarterly basis where we have Vino night at my house. And we talk about our challenges and, so they saw, the book, they read the first few pages, but we're tabling it for official, book night.
Oh,
So,
wow.
I love the experience that you walk us through with your kitchen table and such.
Thank you. I wanna come.
Of course.
I mean, for all of you, if you wanna have a book reading or like invite your friends, please, that's really why. I mean, I wrote this book through the pandemic and I desired a place where I could feel seen and others could feel seen and validated for their experiences. And that's why the backdrop of it is so intentional. And I just recalled something that Michelle Obama said when I went and saw her on tour is that her kitchen table was the same. It's like where you have the most real dialogue. And isn't there something super connective about food? It's just like, I find that with food, you can be your, most authentic self and just bring it. And it opens up a whole world of conversations that I think doesn't always happen. So, yeah.
Yeah, so it really resonated with me. I told Dr. Chopra, I literally went, like, moved from my couch over to my kitchen table, pour myself a glass of wine, and I'm just there reading. But the question, so I think it might have been chapter 2, you mentioned that you embrace finding, what did I call it? A group that you can be vulnerable with
Yeah.
in the workplace. But the question is, how do you prevent that from backfiring you? I forgot how you named the persona, but around this individual who's coming up in the workplace and finding your way. And I'm the only one that looks like me in the room, in every place that I've been a part of. So how am I really careful about finding those right people I can be vulnerable with without it backfiring for me in the future?
Yeah, so I think it's such a great question. And it's one that I have learned through really hard experiences. Like, look, I say I'm who I am, I'm authentic. And it was through a series of experiences that have shaped this part of me, but also with more discernment, right? So I say that because I'm not going into everyone like, oh my God, I'm going to share every single thing about me in service of authenticity. I don't think that's what it is. And I think it's about being vulnerable with the people that you trust that have earned the trust. And I think trust is such a critical factor to this because if we go around walking around, as I did in my early years, just kind of blindly trusting people, it can backfire. So, and it can really harm, especially in the workplace, do a lot of damage that then you have to spend energy and thought and trying to undo and unwind and the awkwardness of the workplace law, right? So my advice would be really lean into one, going slow and getting curious about, wow, who do I really feel can hold space for me and who I feel in my gut I can trust. And then you kind of just peel back the layers a little bit after a little bit. It's a relationship that's built over time. So however it came out in the book, I really need to emphasize that it is an overtime thing that you find your trusted board of advocates, that you find your mentors. It's a relationship. And I think we forget that oftentimes. Like we're in such a not only reactive culture, but an instant culture. Right? I want it now. My fast button. I want my relationship now. I want my Amazon now. I want my promotion now. So it's, I think we forget that these things happen over time. So that's what I would advise is who do you feel like you can trust and, take it step by sharing maybe one thing that isn't so risky, seeing how that goes. And then, expanding that.
And I think the problem has been not giving those layers of the onion. Actually, that's some of the feedback that I get. You don't let us in because I've seen those scenarios where they just jump to overshare, or I've seen those cases where they backfire. But
Yeah.
I love that. Maybe start with the right people, start with something that's bad.
Yes, and be so intentional. Oh my goodness, I have throughout my years been very careful about my inner circle. And it took a lot of intentional pruning, like you do with roses so that new things can grow. I've done that in my life because my energy and time is all I've got. I'm clear that I'm there for my kids. I'm clear that I'm in service for my clients. And then everything else is additive and very intentional. And I think that that goes to what I wanted to add in. If I were to add to the book, it's about a responsible mindset. That if we are truly anchored into that our lives are our own to craft and create, it like flips it on its head to being less of a on the whim and reactive and like whatever comes, to one in which you are really crafting your reality. Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that that people on Zoom are catching the questions,
Yes.
because they didn't hear Fernando's. So I want to check with the people on Zoom. Did Rachel, were you able to share the things that I've typed in? And did
Yeah.
that fill in the missing blanks?
Yes, I just typed Fernando's question into the chat.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Rachel.
So Cecily.
I think something I've struggled with, I've always worked in research and also in the tech space, and similar to Tamara, a lot of times I'm like not only the youngest woman in the room, but the only woman in the room, but one of very few women on the team. And a lot of times, like, no matter how intentional I am with it, I feel like any show of vulnerability has almost been like a discredit to myself and like how people interact with me and the opportunities I've gotten. And I was just wondering if you've ever like had an experience of navigating that or worked with a client navigating that.
Yeah, so
Yes.
You want
yeah, or do you want to?
Go for it, Jonathan.
Okay, so Cecily was saying she finds herself the only woman in a room or one of very few women on a team. She works in the tech space and the research space, and that it feels unsafe to be that vulnerable. That sometimes the sharing from being vulnerable has not worked out well for the men on the team.
And I would like to say, in addition to that, it's not for like lack of welcoming or, valuable coworkers, but it's just it's a different space.
It is.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Cecily, is it?
Cecily.
Cecily. It's a pretty name. Thank you for asking that question. So yes and yes. One of my stints internal was as the head of learning development for DACRI, which is a high-tech startup. So I was their head of learning development. And as a startup, high-tech, you can imagine one gender, which is not a judgment. It's just that was the reality. And similar to you, being like anyone else like me, hello, and having the honor of working with CEOs where I'm like the only person in the room, I get that. And so what I would say are some really practical things is one, like same thing with Fernando, you have to kind of gauge it, right? What's the safety level here? That's actual like real stuff in the workplace. It's like, is it safe here? What's rewarded? How do people show up, and can they have conversations that are real and authentic? And on the line of vulnerability, right? And so sussing all of that, if it feels unsafe, I recommend for women in particular, seeing where you can have allies. And it doesn't always have to be female. It could be like, hey, do you have a trusted person in the workplace that one, you can share experiences with so you don't feel so alone? And I think that's so important because there's been so many studies that show, right? Like Gallup has so many studies out there around the importance of a best friend at work. not saying go out and get a best friend. I'm saying find somebody that you feel that you can trust to share experiences and or get input and feedback so you don't feel so isolated. That's a really good place to start. And if you don't have that in the workplace, find people outside of the workplace that can provide unbiased support and feedback and whatever it is that you're seeking. And know that a lot of organizations are struggling in the way of this, like trying to get much more diversity in the workplace, welcoming conversations. A lot of companies have a long way to go, especially in the tech space. And yes, I coach a lot of women around that. How do they navigate that? I have one example of a person in the book. Her name is Sandy, and she worked in a really male-dominated industry, and she struggled, right? She had a young kid at the time, and would want to take breaks to pump, and she'd have to find some corner of somewhere, kind of dehumanizing to be for her baby. And so for her, there was a lot of like sharp elbowing and trying to position herself and be like somebody else that she felt ultimately was not worth the cost of her energy. And how can she find allies in the workplace to try to change the tide? So that's a big answer. But I think the micro step is, who can you find an ally in?
It's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Folks on Zoom, does anybody have a question around vulnerability in the face of stereotypes that's been burning for you? You can either speak it or type into chat.
I also have just another question for people on Zoom is like, what are you curious about unpacking more? Are there things that we've talked about that you want to dig a little deeper into? Doesn't just have to be on vulnerability.
So there was a question earlier, actually, that popped up that is a category of questions that I know people are interested in. And Fernando came up with the initial versions of them. So do you want to start?
Okay, so when Dr. Trevor shared with us that you were coming in one of my first, of course, like everybody else, I'm sure they rushed to LinkedIn. It's like, all right, let's see what Dr. Sohee's about. And the first thing that came to mind was, first of all, there's just your page, and I started following links to your site and a lot of different posts. And when I told Dr. Trevor, I was like, this is really amazing.
What's amazing? I need feedback.
So-
What am I doing?
I mean, it's similar like to any LinkedIn post, right? You give it 1 or 2 seconds. If it does not appeal to you, you move on, like almost any social media post. But your page, there was something that was felt very inviting, similar to your book, your page. It just all felt very harmonized and very, I don't know what the word is, but it was just very appealing. So how did you get to that point where everything feels like it just ties together from a marketing perspective?
Ooh. Thank you for that feedback, because I'm the one doing this stuff, so no one really comes and goes like, you're really inviting, and that I like to test to see what people are seeing that draws them in. So that's really good feedback. Do you need to repeat the question for people on Zoom?
Can you try saying it louder?
It was feedback and then question along Dr. Sohee's online page for LinkedIn, even the cover of her book, where it's all just very appealing, warm, inviting. And as a consumer or just as an overall user, it kind of triggered curiosity in me to start just poking around, wanting to see more. So the question was, how does someone get to that point?
Yeah.
Great.
So I have to start by saying this, it is so iterative. And it goes to the question earlier around authenticity.
I was gonna say that your page reflects authenticity.
Oh, thank you.
Now that I've met you.
Oh, good. Well, I'm an integrated person.
Riz was saying that she felt the authenticity, echoing what Fernando was saying, she felt the authenticity on Sohee's webpage. And also there was an article about you in some blog that we discovered. I can't remember if Fernando came upon it. I think you did, and you sent me the link. But what we noticed was that you told your immigrant story in both locations, and seeing the way you tell it, there are similarities and then there are adjustments for whatever audience. It felt like we were getting to know a side of you.
Oh, that's lovely. Okay, let me focus. That has me thinking of other things. Okay, it's so iterative, right? I mean, I have been at this entrepreneurship game for 7 years now. And what that means is who you're feeling and seeing now has to be comfortable that others aren't going to resonate with it. So that's a part of the journey of owning authenticity. There are going to be people out there that, oh my gosh, she's so blah. I don't care for her story. I don't resonate with her. That's okay. By the way, that took me years to own. In the beginning, when I came out, I tried it twice. So all of this is very iterative. And I think people need to know that, because what they see at the end of the day, or the website, they think it's like, that's it. You came out and you plopped it down. And I just feel that that's so disingenuous to the journey. The journey is the iterative process of, hey, when I first went out on my own, I thought I was going to do OD. And I said, I do OD. And people are like, what? Okay, we're going to give you change management projects. I was like, okay. Nothing against change management projects, but I hate it. It's not why I came out to do it. And I was in misery. That's a part of the story too, because it informed everything that I wanted to do differently. So that was part one. And it's, oh my God, I was working longer and harder than I ever did internally because I was run by fear. I did not want to have the clients. I wanted to say yes to everything. I want to survive. I want to make money. I want to have a brand. I want to have clients. So I'll take on everything. You want me to do that? Sure. You want me to do that? Sure. Did I want to do any of it? No. So I put that down and went back internal after I had my third child to really just readjust and go, okay, who am I? How do I do this differently? And I think that's an important part of the journey, is like, how do you learn from it? Right? Instead of doing it just like reacting and moving forward, how do you look back on your journey, learn from it, and pivot? That's key to entrepreneurship. So I went back internal to WB, led the team again, and I just knew in my soul, Rachel, I knew in my soul that I had to honor my entrepreneurship gene, which meant that I had to come out and have my own firm, except do it totally differently. So that started the journey to where you see the marketing and the branding now, which is about, I'm in service of working with high achieving women because I am one, and that's authentic to me. And I know that I'm best in service that way. And what I say is my North Star is that I help leaders and I help women find themselves again. Because we get stripped away from the shoulds and the this and the pleasing and all the different things that run our lives. So I am very intentional about what I say yes to and the people that I partner with, down to my website, down to who I bring onto my team as my assistant, my marketer. Everything is very intentional, but that's through the cycle of like trying it out and seeing what didn't land with me. And really, I had an experience earlier this year where I felt completely misaligned. So I took the entire summer to go internal and just go, look, that something was completely off. It does not feel like me. And I had to rejigger. That's the journey. Yeah, because for me, it's like, this is who I am. And to be anyone else, too tiring. I've done it. Like, I don't want to do that again. I'm almost 50. I have no time for that, Does that answer? Yeah.
Thank you. There's a question from Amatya. Amatya, would you like to speak your question now? I think it's really germane.
Ooh, germane.
Sorry, I had to get away to unmute. My question is around kind of navigating your career advancements, like in a strategic way. I think I've been in situations where I always get acknowledged for really great work, like on a global scale, across leadership. I always like have a chance to meet the CEO of every company I work with and pitch learning programs. But I think I always hit that kind of like ceiling of like how to take my career to the next level, like how to get recognized in certain ways to be like promoted to the next level. So I was wondering if you have any advice around how to navigate that in a more like in an authentic way and not seem like overbearing and not to like not be yourself. Kind of like what you said, like a lot of times people say if you want this, then act this way. I think I've gotten that recently and I just don't feel like it's authentic. Like comments like, and I don't know if it's because we're women, but comments around like, oh, if you dressed like this, you'd get this. And it's kind of like, what? So kind of like just to navigate around that in the corporate world, if you have any advice.
Of course I do.
Thank you.
Great question, Mattia. What I am curious about is if you have sought out feedback from peers or people that you respect in the company, just to get a litmus test
Oh,
about. I'm sorry?
I said, oh yeah, and I agree with all the feedback. And I know exactly what certain things are, but I think it goes back to being like your authentic self. So if I were to kind of take that feedback and kind of go as towards what they're saying, then I don't feel like my authentic self. So I think my question is around how do you take that feedback, but also make sure that you're being true to yourself? Like, as you said, like, I don't want to be someone that I'm not.
Yeah, the reality is at the end of the day, workplaces have things that are rewarded, they have things that are shoulds and shouldn'ts, the nuances that you pick up every day around people. And I say that because, it takes energy and time to try to align to that. And that comes down to the question of is it worth it to you? Does it align to your values? And what I'm hearing you say is that it doesn't. And so I guess do you want to do a little of the give and take? So what piece of the feedback do you want to incorporate that does feel doable and aligned? And what pieces do you not want to? And I think that we have to own those choices, right? And if you're asking for feedback and you are making an action plan with your boss actively to say, okay, this is what I heard. These are the things I want to do differently. Help me understand the rest of it in terms of how that impacts my work, how that impacts my end product, how that will derail me from moving up. Like get curious about it and have more conversations. And that way you get more data about how you want to pivot or evolve or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. I just wanted to give you the short.
No, that was good. I like short.
Great. So there were questions around seasons of your career. And actually, there were more questions around how you made solo consulting successful. And Fernando, I think the second question and then the third question are germane right now because it's the how do you make that branding happen? Do you want to ask those?
Please ask. A lot of it was already covered. Yeah, I was just fascinated around the whole branding approach because as I move up in my career in the company that I'm in right now, I've seen that what distinguishes some of the leaders in my brand company is their brand, their internal brand. So I think overall, just branding as a concept, it's something new to me, where to even start, which is why it kind of sparked my question. But
Yeah.
I guess that one of the other ones that I had, you've made a career in corporate America. Do you find it necessary to have that as a building block before you start a consulting career? Does it help from a marketing perspective, or does it help attract other clients?
So yes, Do I think you have to have? No, it depends on what your client, who you want to serve. So I took my corporate experience and saw that there was a real gap in coaching, like C-suite, women leaders, high achieving leaders. So I, used my experience there and it helps tremendously. Look, when I sit down with CEOs, they rely on the expertise and my experience in leading and being in large corporations. I don't think, would they hire me if I hadn't? Maybe. But I do think it gives me a leg up that I have real experience making decisions, leading teams, and that I have been in lots of different industries that help add to my knowledge and the things that I've gone through that gives me credibility in addition to the PhD and 25, whatever years now it is that I've been serving. So that's not to say that you can't do it without corporate experience. For me, it has helped tremendously for the clients that I serve. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. I have a consulting question. So,
Yeah.
now that you've done it for several years,
Yeah.
what do you wish you knew when you were just starting out? And how have you made it a success? Because I'm also like working on creating my own firm. So, is it like you were like, I want to make 20K a month, so I need to get this many clients, or how did you get into it and sustain it for so long and keep it successful?
Yeah.
Can you share your steps?
Maybe that's my next book. Right. This is not going to land well with most of you. It doesn't matter. The truth of it is I didn't anchor my focus on money. I anchored my focus on being in service with the relationships that I have. That has laid the foundation for more relationships in ways that I didn't imagine. So I think it's a different lens if you're like, I have to make X amount, and that's a reality for some people. The model for that is different. It might be B2C, it might be B2B, maybe a combination of both. But what I knew going from my internal experience was like, hey, I have 15 years of relationships. I've done great work with them. I'm pretty sure that they'll want to leverage and collaborate again. I trusted that and I doubled down on relationship building versus making a number of sales. The first year is always going to be flatter than you'd like. The second year, you hope it's doubled. It did. And for me, it's been a climb that has been built on relationships and following, again, the things that gives me energy, like the work that I'm really good at. And that means you have to say no a lot. That's the reality. And if people have a hard time with that, that's going to be the sticking point. To answer your question of like what I wish I told myself starting out is that it doesn't have to be a template. What I mean by that is when you get out there into the world of like starting your own firm, you're going to be bombarded with like, you have to do this and thought leader and and steps A through B to Z to Z. And here's how I'm going to get you funnels and sales and clients. Trust me, like there's more of that, like inundate every day. And it will be tempting on those years when your revenues aren't hitting. It will be. I've stayed away from it to get to my authenticity and knowing of my clients. I am very curating of the relationships. No matter how technology takes us and wherever it takes us, relationships, there's nothing that goes beyond that in terms of like having your own firm, right? That is number one. So I spend a lot of time there, just getting curious about people and how I can be in service. And the business has grown following my interests. The book, I didn't actually set out thinking I was going to write a book. It was in conversation with a person that was on my team at the time. It's like, oh my God, that might be fun. The speaking came organically through the book, which is now the third leg of my business, right? So all of these things have grown when I followed what feels authentic and interesting to me, and the money comes too.
Yes, my question is like I noticed that you mentioned marketing. So you have a marketer. Like for some of us who are going to do, something new in the field, I think maybe it's better to, spend the time on, building up the blogs for that business instead of going to a corporation or, like sometimes you have to be like not to jump into the water. So like what are things what tips do you have to, hire the people, or who would you need in your firm, and also like about who could be a good marketer in the field of IO and for personal, consultations?
Gosh, I can answer that in so many different ways. So, like I didn't start out having a marketing firm. I played around with Instagram and LinkedIn. I'd always been on LinkedIn, but like I played around with the different platforms just to, again, because I'm a tester outer. I have to see how it works first before I bring somebody in. So it's been an evolution. Like, I have on my team now, I'm lucky to have phenomenal support, but that's after years of not getting it right. I had the need for an assistant, a virtual assistant, and I tried out all different firms. I tried out people that recommended firms, and it just didn't land. And I finally have someone that I just feel so cared for. So it's in like, you think and then you test it out and it isn't a match. So year 3 now, I finally have that match of somebody that runs the back of my house. Great. So then, a parallel track has been, okay, who do I need? Do I need an Instagram person? Do I need a post person? Do I need a blah, blah, blah? And getting clear about what it is you're trying to achieve. For me, Instagram is a playground, and I don't get clients from there. And that's not my focus. My focus is to put out cool stuff that I'm doing, partnerships that that I want to amplify and put my thoughts out there. My focus is really on my relationships on LinkedIn. So then that pivots the strategy of, okay, do I need a LinkedIn expert? Who can I get on my firm that can really help me amplify that space? So it's really getting clear on where do you want to play and where do you want to grow? What's your strategy and how do you tap into the right people? And you can ask people questions. Hey, do you know somebody? Hey, blah, 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 start there. So the marketing, I hate to say like, it's been an organic growth in which I've tested out a lot of different things. And it's been a mindset of pivoting a lot and bringing in the people that can amplify my message. So anytime somebody says, okay, we'll do a post in like 8,000, we'll funnel sales, that I have an allergic reaction to that because it feels disingenuous to me. That's not how I want to do my business. And just orienting to that. Does that help?
Yeah, that was great, actually.
There, have you spoken specifically to how you got started speaking on television and other remarkable marketing breakthroughs?
No, so that was so with my first book, I learned a lot through that. I have a different publisher for my second one who I love. And it was in thinking through the strategy of, again, how do I do things differently? Was this your question around the TV stuff, Fernando? And knowing that I wanted to tap a broader audience, and that begged the question of, okay, let me bring in a PR firm. So I found one that resonated with me and my vision. And again, there's a lot of great PR firms out there. Again, you have to find the one that will align with your voice. And I'm very strong about it, meaning like, hey, this is my audience, my avatar, this is my voice, and this is what I want to like my people to feel. And they're like, well, no, how about this and that? Then I'm saying yes, great, and no, I don't want to work with you type of thing. I don't, like bringing in the people that will amplify your voice and your message. And I worked with a PR firm that helped me get those TV spots.
Thank you, everybody, for asking great questions.
Oh, I feel a little fresh right now.
And thank you for Sohee for allowing us to ask you questions where you're opening your soul, and other questions where we're asking more technical things.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It's been quite a journey, this discussion.
I know. I've known Jonathan for 25 years now.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's been a great journey, and thank you for having me back.
My pleasure. It's always great to have you here. You you always come with a message that people end up resonating to. And this time the message is so deep. And I really appreciate the conversation, all the facets of it, all the places that you've taken us.
Oh,
So thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.